You're listening to the Southampton Delivery Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the Southampton Football Club and all of the SFC fans.
We just got to go out and express ourselves.
Fonte with a scooping header.
We just got to get the job done. I'm here to get the job done.
Подача, Остин! Все-таки забил!
It's infield to Mane, 25 yards out. Lovely ball for Bella. Onside, 1-0! Buffon shot! Oh my word!
We ran around a bit like Bambi on ice. It was very, very embarrassing to watch.
And now, your host, Matt Markstone. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Southampton Delivery Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the Southampton Football Club and all of the SFC fans. My name is Matt Markstone. I'm the host of the show. No matter where you are, no matter how you may be listening, whether this is your first time or you've been here before, thank you for making the show part of your day. I hope that you enjoy it. Now, this week we had a late change to the lineup due to injury. Lucy Hynett was originally supposed to come on the show, but she woke up feeling ill. And so I was at that point looking for somebody else, and it was a perfect opportunity to call up Tim Marshall, who's been on the show before. He's at Tim J. Marshall on Twitter and Instagram. But anyway, I called Tim kind of last minute, and he jumped in to talk about what was a busy week and weekend for Saints. And you look at all the unpredictability that happened throughout the week, and with Les Reed and Martin Hunter both exiting the club.
Clearly they need help.
And yet the week kind of ended like we would have thought. We have, of course, dropped points at home.
It's a joke.
We did manage to get a goal from open play, which is nice. Finally, something for the home fans to cheer about. But late on, of course, some controversy, some bizarre refereeing decisions, and ultimately disappointment as Saints dropped 2 points at home to Watford.
It's ridiculous.
And we'll talk about all of that with Tim Marshall this week. But just one thing before we jump into the show is a lot of people have asked on Twitter with the fires going on in California if me and my family are okay. And yes, at this point we are fine. My personal home and my immediate family are far enough away that we shouldn't have any issues. I do have extended family that are near the fire zones, but they are currently safe as well, and I appreciate that from everybody. The only other thing I'd like to say is congratulations to both the Total Saints podcast and the Saints FC podcast for hitting episodes 50. That's a big milestone. Congratulations. But now let's talk to Tim about everything that happened this week with Saints FC. We'd like to welcome back to the Southampton Delivery Podcast, Tim Marshall. You can find him on Twitter at Tim J. Marshall. Tim, first off, thank you for joining me, period. And second of all, thank you for joining me on kind of such short notice.
No problem. Really great to be back.
I don't know. We got a lot of stuff to talk about today. We're speaking on Remembrance Sunday, but we have a game to talk about. We have the firing of Les Reed and the moving on of Martin Hunter and kind of all of the implications of that. So if you're ready, we can start with just a brief introduction of you, I guess, because most people were probably around when you were on last time. But for those that weren't, maybe just give them a little idea about kind of who you are and you know, your time with Saints.
Sure, yeah. So I've been a Saints fan for about 25 years. My first game was at the Dell. My dad took me to see Southampton beat Everton 2-0, and of course Letizia scored, who's my favourite player. Now I live in London, North London, quite near the Emirates. But of course, would never change my team, and I'm a lifelong Saints fan. And yeah, regularly post on Twitter about the team and respond to matches, and sometimes comment on the ugly inside as well.
Yeah. And your dad also a fan. He took you early on, correct?
Yeah. So he went to university in Southampton. He's also from London originally, but he stayed in the area after university, and that's where I was born in Winchester, which lots of listeners from the area will know, and that's very near Southampton. So I grew up there and went to school in Southampton, and yeah, was a fan from a young age, going to the Dell. And then now I'm living in London. I don't get to go to as many games I'd like, but I try and go down as much as possible, and probably go to about 5 to 10 a season, and some home games, and then some in London as well.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously they have to come there for Chelsea and Crystal Palace and Arsenal and Tottenham. So, I mean, you have chances to see them, which is always nice. And I don't know, my time in London was pretty great, despite the weather and everything else. It was a good time. So I appreciate you taking me out. And I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that you and your girlfriend had a dinner with my family and I, and it was one of the highlights of the trip for me. So I appreciate that.
Great. It was really nice evening. Sorry, I heard last week about the encounter with the man being arrested on the street. That sounded a bit scary, but hopefully we got into the pub, had a few drinks and some food, and talked football. It was a bit of an improvement after that.
Oh yeah, I just think it was a little bit of the that time in the afternoon, like it was still getting dark kind of early, and then we were kind of like, we had been walking all day in the rain, and like I think we were just kind of dragging, and I was like, do I get coffee now? We hadn't had it yet. And then all of a sudden this door slams open and here comes that homeless guy. We're like, just grab the kids, keep walking, don't look back. And it was totally fine. But it kind of woke us up a little bit, but it's all right. All right. So I mean, do we start? Obviously, it's not an elephant in the room, but the big kind of news this week was Les Reed kind of being moved on. But I think we start with yesterday. We start with the match and the pre-match stuff. And then we will kind of move towards the kind of the wider picture of Les Reed and what that means, and the Ralph Krueger interview and all of that stuff. So and then we have plenty of listener questions as well. So we'll try to get to some of those if we can. But we got a lot to do. So let's do that. Obviously this weekend, the day we're talking is Remembrance Sunday. In the United States, we refer to it as Veterans Day, and it's a special day here. And it seems like every match all around England, there are kind of these ceremonies that go on before the matches this weekend, because of people kind of looking back and remembering kind of the sacrifice that was made by a lot of the people who served in the armed forces. But I mean, for you, I mean, is this that big of a day all around England, or is it just something that is kind of drummed up and everybody kind of remembers it just for the weekend and then it kind of goes away? Or what's it like from your perspective, maybe living in London and having been around in England kind of most of your life?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very poignant day for many people, especially those with loved ones in the armed forces, and of course many people who have lost relatives in the past in the two great wars. And this year is the 100th anniversary of the end of hostilities of the First World War. So in the build-up, there's been quite a lot of media coverage of stories of bravery and heroism in the First World War, and the huge amount of loss. And when I was actually at college, so aged about 17, I went on a school trip to Belgium to Ypres to see the battlefields, and it was a very moving experience, because you would go and visit the trenches, and the tour guide would say, "Right, you boys stand up, 10 of us," and he'd say, "Okay, go over there." And then he said, "Right, you're dead." Boys of my age at the time, 16 and 17-year-olds, killed in their hundreds of thousands. So yeah, there's been a lot of stories, a lot of coverage, and obviously at each game there's been playing of the last post and minute silence, so for everyone to kind of reflect on the fact that football is so important to us and we love it, but there are bigger things in football, and football can also bring people together as a community. And Southampton, being where it is by the sea, has a sort of strong military and naval history, and was very badly destroyed in the war, so it has a lot of historical ties. So it has a lot of resonance for people of Southampton as a community to come together through football and reflect at the game.
Yeah, and it was nice to see. I think you actually pointed out that was it Saints Brass who were out there, had the opportunity to play. I think it was the last post after the 2-minute silence. I mean, does it mean? I guess, does it mean more because we kind of know them? Like it's not some random dude that we've never met before. It's like you can look at them and see like, hey, I see those people each and every week out there playing, our songs, and now they're getting the opportunity to kind of honor their country and the people who served. Is that? I mean, am I right in that? Or
I think so. And that piece of music is very, very moving. And when I was in Belgium, as I said on that trip, we'd hear that as well. And it's just it's sort of very evocative, and people instantly recognize it, and it just brings to mind military sort of service and remembering the fallen. So I think that's a very touching tribute before the game started.
And I mean, there is, I don't want to say there's controversy, but not everybody wears the poppy on their jersey, and I think most footballers, I mean, you saw Gabbiadini and a bunch of other people wearing it. I think everybody on the Saints squad wore it, but there have been kind of those who chose not to. And I guess from an outsider's perspective, it's somewhat confusing. Like, it takes some digging to kind of understand the reasons why somebody wouldn't want to do it. But is that tolerated really? Or do people get kind of upset about that stuff?
It depends who you ask. Like the tabloid newspapers, The Sun, etc., will rather depressingly each year whip up a frenzy towards James McLean, who is Irish and chooses not to wear one. Nemanja Matic as well decided not to today for very different reasons. He's from the Balkans, and he said it reminded him of his childhood and warfare and conflict there. So from my perspective, I respect everyone. If they want to choose not to, or they choose to, it's an individual decision. But yeah, there will be intense media scrutiny on people if they don't. When you tune in television for any program, the news, current affairs discussion program, people will be wearing them. So there's quite a strong emphasis on doing so, and it is seen as disrespectful not to if you're in a public kind of arena like that, whether it be football or on television, or if you're doing a lecture at university or wherever you have an audience. People don't generally do so. But the poppies on the shirts, I think they'll be auctioned off afterwards, I think, and the money will go to military charities. So that's another reason why they're on there, to raise further funds.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And like one more thing that as part of this year's thing is Stephen Davis. They planted an oak tree at Staplewood as a way to honor those people who served and fell during the First World War. So that was kind of a neat touch from him. Some people were saying some pretty horrible things about him on social media, just simply because he hasn't been playing a lot. But I think that his role at the club now and in the public and in Northern Ireland as well, I think it goes well beyond kind of playing central midfield for us, So I was happy to see that. I was happy to see the club take the time and make sure that was done and allow him to do that. And, coming from America, our kind of perspective of the First World War is different. The way it's taught in history books is different. For a lot of my childhood, we were taught that we were the kind of the saviors. We were the ones who went over there and helped everybody out. And it's like, when you take a step back and kind of look at everything else, the fact that we weren't attacked, we weren't damaged, we were kind of safe from all of that. And sure, we made some sacrifices in terms of luxuries that we gave up during the wartime, but it's nothing that when you start looking at it in comparison to what the people who were living through the war, living in war zones, actually kind of dealt with. So it's, for me as a history teacher, it's kind of this is a nice look at kind of how people who were kind of directly affected look back on it, I guess.
Yeah, and I think with the First World War, there's a lot of literature out there because there are a lot of soldiers that fought wrote poetry. And I think it's the sense of that kind of completely pointless industrial slaughter with hundreds of thousands of people lined up on sort of two opposite sides of a field, and then just walking to at actual walking pace towards machine guns to try and capture a small bit of land that changed hands several times. And then, of course, there's the famous story that at Christmas time, the troops came out of their respective trenches and played a game of football and exchanged cigarettes and gifts, and sort of became friendly, and then had to go back to shooting each other. So, yeah, really senseless, and it really hits home, as I said, just how young a lot of the boys were. But it's to commemorate, obviously, all wars, but with a particular focus this year on the First World War. I think also there was the unveiling of a plaque at the club as well.
That's right.
They've lost their lives, and really depressing to hear you say about Stephen Davis getting abused, because that's not the time at all. It's a post about commemoration, and I've never heard anything negative at all about his behaviour off the field. He seems a completely commensurate professional, nice guy. He's a club captain now. Yeah, he needs to be moved sort of to a more kind of leadership off the pitch role. And I think he knows that as well. And as he said, he's always represented the club in a really positive way, and I have nothing but respect for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, the fact is that there are people like out there on the internet that are going to do that no matter what. And sometimes we just have to ignore them. But it just happened to be one of the things that I saw and that was brought to my attention was that particular person or those few people kind of giving abuse, which I don't have time for, I guess. I'm not going to tolerate that really. But yeah, like you said, the club did unveil a plaque, and it was definitely clear that there was a big focus on this from all across football, but especially it's nice to see the club making sure that they make that a point of remembrance and recognition. So, yeah, but I guess kind of just moving on. I don't know if there's a good way to move on to the game or not, but we did play a game. People were saying prior to the Reeds hacking that this may be Mark Hughes' last chance. He had to win or be moved on or whatever. And in his press conference, he mentioned that Wesley Hoot had a foot infection and he may not be able to play. He did also mention that Lamina was struggling with something, but he thought he would be able to. So I didn't think Hoot was going to play. I thought we would see some form of perhaps Stevens and Vestergaard, but it wound up being Yoshida and Hoot. And in addition to that and Gabbiadini coming in and Armstrong coming in, those were the three changes. It was Yoshida, Armstrong, and Gabbiadini. But what did you think about the lineup that we set out there? I mean, were you happy with that, or would you rather have seen something else?
No, I was pleased, actually. I was pleased to see Yoshida come back into the team. I was pleased to see Gabbiadini start. In terms of a pattern, though, of consistency, you do sort of get a sense that actually it could be as much as throw a load of names up in the air and see where they land. I think you said you've changed centre-back partnerships 4 times season. It feels a bit like last week we were absolutely hammered, so let's jig things around a bit and see what happens. But obviously putting Gabbiadini in from the start paid off. He had a really good game, took his goal well, and I thought we played well, actually. I mean, it wasn't going to get any worse than last week, but we put in a good performance, and Watford had been on a pretty good run, actually, doing a lot better than people thought. In fact, some people had tipped them for relegation, but their model of changing the manager doesn't really seem to affect them, and they've had some really good attacking players like Pereira. So I thought. You said before the game, given our respective forms, 1-1 would have actually maybe been a good result, but because of the way it panned out, which I'm sure we'll get to later. It felt very frustrating and almost like a defeat in a way.
Yeah, and I don't know. I was just thinking, like, for me, when we play the back four, like, you need to have some sort of consistency and. So I was trying to think back to all of the different combinations, and I think it's 4. It could be more than that. I didn't take time to go back and look through all the exact partnerships, but it's very clear we're still kind of tinkering, and people have locked down spots. Cedric isn't going anywhere. McCarthy isn't going anywhere. Bertrand will miss out next time because of the yellow card accumulation. But Højbjerg and Lamina seem to be stalwarts in the middle. Redmond seems to have claimed a place in Ings, and then so you really only have a couple of spots that are up for kind of debate. But they do seem to be changing all the time. We can't find a formation or a lineup that does all of the things we need to do. And of course, it's not Hughes' job to make people happy with his lineup selections. But I mean, yesterday, I think people were mostly okay with that. I think a lot of people were happy to see Yoshida come back in. They would have preferred that Hoot be the one that's dropped, but I think he's the only natural left-footed center back we have, and I'm going to keep saying that that's part of the reason.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think a lot of people are saying, what does Hoot have to do to get dropped? I mean, I think, wasn't it last week, he'd scored 2 own goals, which was as many goals as we'd actually scored in the other net for a month or so.
Yeah.
He always seems to have a mistake in him. But for some reason, he's always preferred. I don't know if it's just, as you said, that left-footed thing, but I think people might have wanted to see Vestergaard come back in, or even Stevens. I think he would maybe be people's third choice to partner Yoshida at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know, and people were kind of slating Cedric a little bit yesterday for his performance. I think there were plenty of mistakes for the actual Watford goal that everybody could have improved on that. But that, I mean, you go through a whole entire 90 minutes plus stoppage time, and you have kind of one breakdown, and they manage to score from it. That I think that's what happens, and I think we got lucky a couple of other times, so we'll see. Kind of just right off from first kickoff, I was worried about De La Feu. I can't spell his name; it's spelled like 6 different ways in my notes, but oh well. But he is, I mean, he's fast. He is technically good. He was playing last year at Barcelona for portions of the season. So we know that he has it. He's not, some of these guys have a lot of promise or they get talked up a lot, but I think De La Feu actually can do it. And I think yesterday, at least early on, he really was going to give Bertrand a really hard time. And kind of the first chance that he had was just lazy from Bertrand to kind of dangle the leg out there. I don't know if they showed it on Match of the Day, but he kind of dangles the leg out, the ball goes right by him, and then he's just chasing De La Feu, who probably makes the wrong decision in trying to shoot when he probably should have squared it. But I mean, looking at that Watford team right off the bat, were you worried about the way the team started the game, or were you confident that they were going to grow into it at all, or were you just happy we didn't concede, or how were you kind of feeling, kind of maybe the first 5 or 10 minutes of the game?
Yeah, I actually thought we didn't look too bad. I agree with you about Bertrand, and I'm not really sure what's happening with him. It almost seems like the captaincy has actually really affected him in a negative way rather than a positive way. And I was saying on Twitter earlier, actually, I wonder if it's just the motivation of playing for Saints, because when I was watching Liverpool, thinking how good Van Dijk and Mane are, Bertrand's played in a Champions League final, and Cedric's played in a Euros final for Portugal, but they just don't seem to have that kind of motivation each week. And I think, as you said with the Fulham game, it might be interesting. Bertrand's out anyway, but maybe even to see like Jan Valery come in for Cedric, and then have obviously Target on the other side, and see if that really reshapes our defense. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting because Fulham want Target again on loan in January, I think, or they tried to sign him permanently, I think, this season. So it'll be interesting to see that. But yeah, I mean, there's nobody to push Cedric really. I mean, our options are Stevens or Bednarak, and they're just not really the same. And yeah, I kind of see it too with Font. Like Font tended to fall off after that Euro win. After Portugal went and did that, he wasn't really the same. Whether his mind was elsewhere or the motivation was elsewhere or whatever it was, something wasn't there. But then you look at guys like Lamina, and I guess I don't know. I kind of say like he's putting in a shift each and every week, and but I know a lot of people wouldn't. I know a lot of people won't agree with that. But maybe it is. Maybe it's the fact that they feel like, well, at where I'm at in my career, the contract I signed here, like I've basically achieved everything I'm going to. And so I'm just going to play it out. But I don't know. At the same time, they seem too young to be doing that too. Like they can probably each get one more move. Yeah,
I don't know if it's they think they don't have the players around them to step up. Because Bertrand was playing with a really good Chelsea team, and obviously Cedric was in a Portugal team that went and won the Euros. So they're just thinking, well, if I can't pull this off, then I'm just not going to be motivated. And I think I saw on Twitter someone said that the communication between Bertrand and Redmond was quite bad, and Bertrand was sort of sarcastically applauding Redmond when he had misread what he's trying to do. So Redmond was getting nervous about those overlaps. And when you have that kind of breakdown between defense and field and attack, is not very good, really. And that's, I think, something that's got a lot worse over the years and is worrying, that kind of lack of kind of team communication, looking at each other. I don't know if that's an issue with Hughes and how he communicates with the team. But yeah, they look happy enough when they sort of score and they celebrate together. But over the course of 90 minutes, I think that's a kind of real worry, really, there.
Yeah, there were a couple of instances yesterday where people gave the ball away. People made bad passes, like put people under pressure. And Højbjerg was yelling at Ings for a while over a pass that he played, but I think that Ings I think I read that Ings injured himself in the warm-up, or got injured during the warm-up, and so played the first 40 minutes or so and wasn't 100%. And so I think that like when you figure that out afterwards, you look back at some of the passes he played, and he was probably in pain and trying to make sure he didn't lose the ball, and chose to play a pass that he normally wouldn't play, where normally he'd try to make a move and get out of it himself, maybe. Højbjerg gave up the ball more often than normal yesterday. But yeah, I don't know. It is weird. And there were a couple of times where Bertrand and Redmond clearly weren't on the same page, but the whole team is trying to figure out a way to attack, and that whole aspect of the team isn't working. So I wouldn't necessarily blame that on individuals. I'd blame it on the fact that if we were scoring goals and kind of being free flowing going forward, like those things will come together. But everybody, I think, is nervous. You saw last week when people kind of weren't attacking, weren't getting into the box, weren't attacking the space where the ball, they could anticipate the ball to be, because nobody knows where it's going to be. And I think with that kind of stuff, it has to be just nervousness and kind of this idea that they don't really know how to attack and they don't know how other people are going to work. And if that's down to the training ground or whatever, I'm not sure.
It must have been difficult as well for Armstrong to come back into the team. I think people were happy to see him there. He'd obviously showed a lot of promise in preseason and the early games. But then to come into a system which he's not really sure about, I think Højbjerg, who has been one of our best performers this season, had a pretty bad game. And I don't know if by his standards, and I don't know if that's because him and Armstrong haven't really worked out exactly how to play with each other. And also coupled with the fact that Watford are a really physical team. They're a lot of big sort of strong guys in there. And when they played Tottenham at home early in the season, they absolutely bullied them off the ball, and they won 2-1 in the end. And I thought, actually, this could happen to us as well. We could get bullied here, and I don't think we did. I think we held our own. But I was actually surprised to see that we're actually maybe the second shortest team in the league, because you think we've got some tall-ish players like who obviously and Lamina and Vestergaard if he plays, which he wasn't.
Right.
On the whole, we're sort of a fairly sort of not particularly robust big team in the way Watford was. There was a real danger of them just kind of dominating us in the middle there.
Yeah, but I would say that the Lamina and Højbjerg worked really hard, but Højbjerg didn't have his best game, and that's okay. That's going to happen. But I was really interested to see that it looked like Gabbiadini was playing out wide right for the most part, and kind of Armstrong was kind of just behind Ings or up with Ings, and I wasn't really sure how that was going to work. But I thought he had a pretty good game. He created some chances. He put a cross in or a couple of crosses in. He attempted to pull one back that nobody happened to be there. But I thought that he played well, especially for not being in the team. And I would have liked to have seen had Ings maybe gotten to the 60-minute mark, what they could have done coming out of halftime. But overall, I thought they were kind of just fine. I guess. Let's talk a little bit about the chance that Armstrong missed. I guess the ball came in and he got to it and he just happened to hit the goalkeeper. And I think that if that goes in, then maybe all of the other stuff that we have to talk about in a minute kind of is meaningless, I guess, because we're already up by a goal. But I guess to go to Gabbiadini's actual goal. I mean, I tweeted that, it wasn't pretty, but it was so beautiful because finally we get a goal from open play. And you think back to Swansea and some of the other goals that he scored. It's just this kind of scrappy, I'm going to latch onto this and I'm going to put it away. And it's just, that's it. It wasn't a whole lot of buildup. There wasn't anything. We came from sustained pressure and earning a corner and then another corner. But I mean, for you, what was kind of your feeling when that goal went in? Was it relief? Was it excitement? Or how were you kind of feeling at that moment in the match?
Yeah, I was so happy. I really like Gabbiadini. I think this is kind of contrary to my tweet last week in which he wasn't one of the players I said I would keep, but that's only because he just isn't getting the game time. So I was really pleased for him. I think Ings did great work really to basically manage to kind of battle away and dig in and get the ball loose for him, because we saw at the Newcastle game, sort of Ings and Austin were kind of getting in each other's way. Mm-hmm. So to have the skill to kind of get the ball out from under his feet and get it to his teammate was really clever and a good assist there. And then just for us to score at home was such a huge lift, because what's been happening is, we go there, all the fireworks go off, there's a bit of hype and build up, people cheer on the team for a bit, and then it goes really flat, and that's because we just don't score, we concede, whatever happens. But yeah, to give the crowd a lift means get everyone on their feet, get everyone singing, and just a nice feeling. And a lot of people tweeted the usual jokes about, I can't remember what it feels like for us to have scored, and I'm going to faint and all this stuff. But 1-0 is never really enough for us is the problem. So it was wonderful, but then I thought we're going to need another one here, particularly because of those good attacking players you mentioned that Watford have with Delafeu and Pereira and so on. I thought they could easily hit us in the counter attack. I thought this is good, but we need to build on this. And even when we do, get a 2-goal lead, there's always a risk, as I so bitterly experienced at Brighton. But in the moment, just real joy at that. I
mean, I would say that there were portions of that first half where you could watch it and go like, if you only saw those clips, you would say that team's pretty good. The passing sequences that were there, the way we move the ball from kind of from front to back, and from, I mean, you watch teams that are comfortable in possession in the attacking third, where they can find little passes, they can get into tight spaces, they can get it back out, and they can get it back into another dangerous area. And it doesn't have to be like the overly telegraphed, we're going to get it wide and whip it into the box. Like there's movement there, and there's confidence in the passing. And for portions of the game, we had that, and I haven't seen that in a long time. I would say that yesterday was maybe, there were probably 5 or 10 instances where that was the best we've looked all season. But we still yet couldn't find the next goal, or the one to kind of really truly put it away. And I mentioned the Armstrong miss. He's going to look back at that and go like that's going to be one of those ones where we were right there, but chances get missed. And I was happy that we had chances in the box. Everybody talks about how many shots we've had all season. A lot of those shots have been from some distance. They haven't been the greatest. And to see us getting, somebody kicked the dog or stepped on him. To see us get those shots within the area in a really dangerous area where actually the expected goals would be much higher, I thought was great. So I don't know, like, I'll be honest that going into halftime, I wasn't necessarily hugely confident, because there's always that kind of worry in the back of your head. You mentioned Brighton, and we've seen it happen too often over the past couple of seasons where we've blown leads late in games. And I mean, I don't know. I think the change forced Austin for Ings. I think that changes our game plan a little bit. But I don't know. Can I ask you before we move on to the second half? Like, Charlie Austin came out, I don't know if it was last week or the week before, and said like everybody's got to get behind us, and a lot of people kind of went after him for saying that, because a lot of people said, you're not fit, you're not doing this, like they really kind of went after him pretty hard. And I can't say that I necessarily disagree. It doesn't always look like he is fully committed, maybe. And maybe that's unfair on him to say that. But what did you make of I don't know if you remember that conversation there, or that tweet, or that whatever it was that he said. But if you do, like, I don't know, how do you feel about that versus the performance and then the post-match interview that he gave yesterday?
Yeah, I think that each week they'll sort of put someone up to say the usual platitudes about they need everyone on board and pulling in the right direction and so on. And he seemed to be a man with a personal point to prove. I read on Twitter that someone said the reason that he ran towards the bench and was pointing and gesturing at someone was because they'd been right behind him in the dugout and said, "Oh no, don't bring on Charlie, bring on Obafemi." So he was going over there to sort of give them peace of mind. Whether that's true or not, they said themselves, and they don't know. But it's quite funny. But I'm not his biggest fan. And actually, when I saw that him and Deeney were coming on at the same time, I made the comparison of it being like two medieval armies lined up in their battlements, ready to load the catapults with a ox cart to fling over the battlements. Quite an agricultural player, a bit like Andy Carroll, I suppose, is the master of that. He's not very mobile, but he's a poacher, and he was our top goal scorer last season. So I guess if he gets a chance, and it was a really good finish.
It was,
and obviously Yoshida was not offside and not in the goalie's eye line, so it was a ridiculous decision. And I think it was entirely to level up the penalty that should have been given. So him then coming out afterwards and giving that interview was funny, and people loved it, because usually you get an incredibly scripted, very neutral kind of media train within an inch of your life kind of response from players who don't want to get a fine, or people's eyes glaze over and say, "Oh, here they go." But people loved that because they thought it was refreshing, and it was showing real passion. And he seemed to have burst a blood vessel in his eye. He got so angry, and he'll probably get a fine for that. What it reminded me of, actually, at the Emery saying it's a joke, was actually the Spinal Tap, when Nigel Tufnell was furious about his backstage bread being a bit too small. I don't know if you've seen that clip, but a few people posted the Spinal Tap reference there, which I quite like. So the call to arms, I suppose, from him, and then he felt that he delivered that, and he'd given the fans something to cheer, only for it to be taken away. It must be pretty frustrating. But as I said, we actually were very lucky with the penalty. And if VAR was to have been used yesterday, then we would have almost certainly been down to 10 men with Bertrand on a yellow already. He would have been sent off. Watford, would they have scored? Deeney's only missed 3 penalties, I read. And in general, 75% of penalties get converted. McCarthy, I suppose he's as good as anyone at saving them, but yeah, pretty sure that would have been scored. So that would have been 1-1. And then with 10 men, we'd really probably have to hold on for a draw rather than be going for a win. So there's so many, what ifs there. But in the end, it was a terrible performance for the referee, for both sets of fans. And people calling into the BBC 606 yesterday, you actually had Saints fans and Watford fans in agreement saying that the goal should definitely have stood, but a penalty should have been given.
Yeah, and I think that it was that man's second ever Premier League game. He's just this year been promoted to the Premier League. That's the second game in charge. And I normally am not one to criticize referees because that job is immensely hard, and you get no love from anybody for anything. I don't think there are referees that anybody likes. There's always something to complain about. But yesterday he had a really bad game. He did a poor job of managing the game. You look at kind of the way some of the things built up over time and kind of how chippy it got towards the end. I think that's all down to the way that he chose to manage the game, and his decision to disallow Charlie Austin's goal, I felt, was longer than some of the VAR decisions, over the summer in the World Cup, to confirm or disallow. And it took so long to do that it was totally disheartening, because I knew I had to go to my daughter's games because she had a tournament yesterday and today, but I went to her game, and so I was not watching the second half live, and I saw that it was 1-1. I saw that's how it ended, and I went, oh, that kind of sucks. And I went ahead and queued up the tweet for questions and the 3-word kind of match summary and stuff, and I got flooded, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to go back and watch. And then to know that there were 2 referee mistakes coming, and watching the game and knowing like, oh, and then you can just see it, and it's just like, oh my, like how did this happen? It was beyond frustrating, simply because we really needed the points, to be quite honest, and it would have been really nice to be able to get it, but it probably is it probably in the end is fair, because I think it evens out. And Bertrand being gone for that match and then the next match, and I don't know if then that 5th match, because he would have had 5 or 6 yellow cards now, I don't know if that means it's 2 games or what, but it wouldn't be great. So going back to Charlie Austin a little bit, do you think that kind of re-endears him to the fans, I guess? Do you think that puts him back on our good side, because so many fans just a week ago were kind of not happy with him? Or do you think that fans will forget week to week and we'll just move on, and if you score, then we can forgive you for a lot of other things?
No, I mean, the reaction on Twitter was people seem to generally love it. They love the passion, as I said. And actually what happened was as soon as the various organisations were putting up the clip, the Premier League or the FA seemed to be taking it down for violating their rights, or maybe they didn't like the fact that he was so critical of the officials with justification. So I don't think people really like the fact that he went completely off script and he didn't follow some of those players will criticise referees, but they'll couch it in very kind of polite language, saying, oh, it's a difficult job, and maybe they didn't quite see it this time, but who knows. But he went full on, gave it both barrels. I don't really like him. I think he's a bit of a selfish player, and if you're Sergio Aguero, okay, you can be selfish because you're going to score 99 times out of 100. But if you're Charlie Austin and you're being selfish, you're just often wasting chances. You're getting in the way, as I said, of people like Ings, and his numbers don't really kind of back up his cockiness. Like his celebration was a really long celebration, and maybe he was going to find that guy in the crowd, as I said, to give him hell. But you kind of really need to, I think, deliver if you're going to be that kind of full of yourself. And you want a striker that's confident, but he really is kind of playing on the edge, and he has something to prove, and he just runs out of steam quite quickly. So myself and quite a few other people were actually tweeting saying they would have liked to see Obafemi come on instead, and just keep up the pace. I think had Long come on, that would have been a very unpopular decision. So in the pecking order, I'd say you have obviously Ings is number 1, and then it's between Gabbiadini and Austin, then Obafemi and Long. But generally, I think the fans quite like that response, and he might get a bit more of a kind of cheer and support the next time he's out for that kind of backs against the wall, the world's against us mentality.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so we talked a little bit about the referee and kind of, like, from my perspective, mismanagement of the game. And then there's the instance where it kind of all almost comes to a head where there's something like Redmond runs into whoever it is, and there's a little bit of a shove as they're going down. The guy must have said something to Redmond. Redmond gets up in his face. They bump chests. They touch faces, actually. Then they go back in for it again. De La Feu comes off and comes over and grabs Redmond. He winds up getting a yellow, but at that point, kind of tempers are flaring. There have been some challenges. There have been some things that have happened. And it was nice to see the fight, I guess, from Redmond, that he wasn't going to stand there and back down. But the team, though, seemed to, as much as they were up for that, they seemed to kind of be retreating as we got into the 88th minute, to be closer to their own goal and defending deeper and deeper and inviting Watford on. And I think that's going to frustrate fans, because that's something that we can't really afford to do. And I think that's where their goal comes from. It's like really the one or two times that they had some sustained pressure, they wind up scoring, and it's and just kind of walking through the goal. I don't know if you saw it on Match of the Day, but some of the things that I kind of noticed were like, it's a deflected clearance that falls to Holebas, I think, and he puts his shoe behind it, his foot behind it, whatever you want to say. It goes off Cedric, and I do have to say that there was one announcer here in the United States who could not do anything but talk about how unhappy he was with how players were acting. Like, and it was just it was short of just saying, back in my day, that would, like, every single time he said anything, and it was super, super frustrating and annoying. But if you can tune him out, he did point out some pretty clear things about their goal. I mean, Dini should never have been allowed to get that cross in. Hoot does poor there. Yoshida has been pulled to the near post, and he doesn't do well enough to get it away. James Ward-Prowse comes by and attempts to clear it, and basically just smashes it, and the deflection falls to Holebas, and nobody closes him down. Gabbiadini attempts to get there, but is too far away. Cedric doesn't step close enough, puts his hand behind his back and turns his back, and the deflection kind of fools McCarthy, and all of it. You know, you can look at all of these errors and say, well, like, that's our luck right now, or that is essentially how we are defending recently. And it's frustrating to everybody, I assume, and not just me, that's how we concede, is just we do so well kind of all afternoon. Maybe we make a few mistakes in the first half, we get away with it, but we don't do enough to learn from it so that it doesn't cost us 2 points in the end.
Yeah, I mean, there was such an inevitability about that equaliser. I just knew it was coming. We just don't seem to be able to close out a game. I think I saw a stat saying we're one of the teams that's thrown away the most points from winning positions. And again, do you lay the blame on the manager for that, for not being tactical, or is it the players? I mean, the number of mistakes you just pointed out, that's not really luck. That's error, and you have some of the same culprits again. So that's James Ward-Prowse 2 weeks in a row against City. He failed to clear and they scored. Didn't matter anywhere near as much then, because we were always going to lose against City. Right. But this was absolutely crucial to try and hang on to that 1-0 win. Cedric as well, what's he doing? People have been really critical of him not getting stuck in and having his hands behind his back and not doing everything he can to get rid of it. You want that bodies on the line, real defending that you used to see when you had the kind of Fonte and Van Dijk partnership, or Fonte and Lovren, just our absolute rock solid centre backs in the past that would just really throw their bodies on the line and do everything. And now it's just completely kind of chaotic and headless chickens kind of running around, and you just know that we're going to throw it away, and it's just so frustrating. And you know, even sitting at home, you want to throw your computer out the window, but when you're actually in the ground, it's just the worst feeling in the world, and it ruins the rest of the day, because you just don't come away from St Mary's these days with feeling happy, and it's always that feeling of frustration. It's just such a terrible feeling when it's always so close to the final whistle as well.
Yeah, I mean, you sum up most Southampton fans' days who were in the ground yesterday. If they had to come in from a neighboring kind of suburb or city, whatever you want to call it, there were bus replacements, first of all, so it took extra time to get there. It was absolutely pouring. The weather was atrocious looking, and I'm sitting here, in shorts and a t-shirt like every other day, because it's beautiful and sunny and all this stuff. And I'm just going like, that looks awful. That's what I was expecting when I went over last time around Easter, and it wasn't quite that bad, thank goodness. But I mean, that looked terrible. Then the stadium doesn't look great because the seats down close to the pitch are kind of empty because everybody's moved back and gotten under some sort of shade or shelter if they can, because it's that nasty outside. We give that up, and then everybody has to get back on the bus replacements to go back home. And it's like, what a crappy day. Like, and never mind kind of the thrill of scoring a goal, but just to have all of those other things happen and to walk out of there and to hold on really at the end of it for a draw just meant that a lot of people were going to leave there and be super disappointed. And I think the club has to understand that. Like there are sacrifices that people make every single week, sometimes twice a week, to come see the team. And it's not just, we wake up and open our eyes and we're bright and shiny in St. Mary's and we're all warm and cuddly. Like that's not how it works, And at the end of the day, this is, it's one win in 17 chances at home. That's 8 games without a win in the Premier League. It's going to be over a calendar year before we have the chance, or since our last victory at home, before we get the chance to do it again. And it's just, I guess 1 win in a calendar year, because we do have Bournemouth. But I mean, that's it. And that's got to be frustrating for everybody involved. And it has to be frustrating for the players too. I don't want to say that they're not hurt by this, but for the fans that are paying the money to go to the season, to buy season tickets or buy games on the day and all that other stuff, like it's just got to be, I mean, I don't know how your dad feels, but it can't be great.
Yeah, I mean, you really hit the nail on the head there. It's just that attritional grinding you down. There's so many different ways you can cut the stats cake, and you throw out a few there, but the main one is that one home win in the calendar year, and only 4 home wins since the start of the 2016-17 season, I think. So people on Twitter the other day were saying, in terms of the number of goals scored at home, it's something ridiculous like £25 a goal that you pay to see one.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just that once upon a time, St Mary's was a fortress, and against the teams around us like Watford, Brighton, Newcastle, you just think that's a home win. Go in there with confidence. They did win inevitably back then. You leave feeling good. And now you think, we could always lose against the big teams. And against the teams around us, we're thinking, we're probably going to draw and maybe lose as well. So there's just no feeling of optimism. And it's not a nice way to kind of go into a game, the team you love and support, thinking that way. And especially, as you said, it's your whole day is around that when you're going to the game. You get up and you think about it. You want to look on Twitter to see who people think is going to be in the lineup, and maybe go and have some lunch and beers before the game. And then walk the long walk back to wherever you're going to kind of digest it and discuss it and do the whole post-match analysis and things. And when it's just negative the whole time, it really kind of puts a dampener on your weekend. But we've been there before. We've been in relegation scraps, the Dell especially. But people kind of look back on those times with much more kind of sort of happiness. And maybe it's rose-tinted spectacles, but it always seemed like back then there was, first of all, we had people like Letizia. It was more entertaining, more goals, and a lot of people would say more fight as well in the team. It's it's a combination of lots of things, but the stats, as we just read out, just make for really bleak reading.
And I guess you talk about rose-tinted glasses. When does that happen? Because obviously we still have to discuss Les Reed and kind of his dismissal or his firing. Ralph Krueger came out and spoke, but I mean, right now, I mean, I guess whenever you go through like a breakup, right? It doesn't matter how great your relationship was in the past. The months or weeks or days or whatever right around that are never good, and it never ends kind of on great terms. But maybe in a year or 2 years, you can look back and say like, these were actually some really good times. We learned some really valuable lessons from this. But is that going to happen with Les Reed? Do we owe him anything in terms of a fan base to kind of look and give him some credit for some of the things that he's done? Or is it just he laid down on the job and a lot of was he just riding Cortese's coattails, as I've heard a lot of people say?
No, I think you have a team of people, and when things are going well, and they see the team is obviously pulling together, and good decisions are made, and he was involved in signings, and he signed some good players, and we were on an upward trajectory. In 2010, obviously we finished second and got promoted to the Championship, and then when we came up to the Premier League, things just got better and better. So I think in our first season back, we won 9, then it was 15, and then 2 seasons of winning 18 games, which just seems so far away. Even 12 under Puel, and then 7 last season, and just 1 won this season, which is terrible. So you can really see that, that massive downward trajectory, and he's the fall guy. And I suppose Laurie McMenemy, the former Saints manager, was writing in the Echo, and he said back in his day, the focus was really just on the players and the manager, but now it's the board get just as much scrutiny. With social media, people know who they are and what they look like, and they come out in interviews and say things and so on. So it was his time to go, I suppose. And the signings just haven't really been working over the last few years. They spent a lot of money. People don't see it as being investment being either wisely spent or any more kind of coming in, or spent on the wrong things like fireworks or endless kind of social media videos. And Ralph Krueger kind of gave a very, as usual, quite kind of enigmatic and strange interview that didn't really reveal very much. But his justification was, he was saying, and he loves to use kind of apprentice style blue sky management speak. But he said, the start phase of the season wasn't good. We've slipped on our percentage points, and now it's time for the ownership to strategically make the direction. So the board is Krueger, it's Gao and his daughter as the finance director, and they obviously, and Katerina Lieber, of course, and they kind of collectively decided that as the head of football development, I suppose as the title was, the football hadn't been developing anymore, and therefore he had to go. But the reaction as I was reading on the Ugly Inside forum seemed to be kind of, people were largely pleased that he'd gone, and should have happened sooner. In fact, some people were saying should have fired him when Poch went, because that was a huge loss. There's a debate to be had there, with Krueger going all night, about whether Poch would have stayed or not. But they seemed to be quite ruthless when they sacked Adkins, for example, when they sacked Puel.
Right.
So they weren't afraid of making the big decisions. He's also the guy that brought in Hughes as well, and that's not looking perhaps the best decision either. So who knows whether his removal makes more likely or less likely that Hughes is going to go too.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at the club and when I started supporting the club, the youth academy, that pathway from the youth academy to the first team, and to be completely honest, from our first team to other, clubs that were our bigger clubs, guys were going to, guys from the youth academy were going to Arsenal, guys from the youth academy were winding up in Liverpool, signs that we made were winding up in Liverpool, like that. As a kid, kind of going through the academy and going like I could potentially be playing, Champions League football or Europa League football for Southampton, or a bigger club like that. To me, like I really like that idea, not because I want to see players leave the club, but because I guess as a coach, I guess as somebody whose favorite sport is baseball, or I guess the sport that I've watched the longest is baseball. I think that football has definitely taken over a lot of my time and passion in the last 5 or 6 years. But just that kind of reliance on building a farm system and having that be good, it was great. And now, I mean, Obafemi is the first, I guess, real youth team player to have a shot in what seems like forever. It seems like we loan everybody else out just like everybody else does. And few and far between those guys are coming up and actually getting the chance to make an impact. And that to me signals a red flag that there are problems behind the scenes. And I would put that down to Les Reed and Hunter and their kind of inability to kind of continue to move things forward. Maybe we were ahead at one point, and now everybody else is caught up and we failed to take that step. And whether that's true or it's just me thinking, that's how I see it. And that's how I kind of am thinking about it. And so I can't really complain too much about the decision to let him go. I think it's probably the right call. In terms of Ralph Krueger, I don't know. It seems like a lot of the off-field stuff that Guy wants to get done, that's kind of his job to do. And he seems to be doing that okay, whether we, and I think especially you and your dad and the fans that are in the ground, I think to some extent you are being marginalized a little bit, because the focus has definitely gone to shifting the brand a little bit and expanding the brand overseas. And I think all of those things have to be done, but I'm not sure that he is, I guess with a foreign owner and a foreign guy in Krueger kind of running that system, you run the risk of alienating your local fan base a little bit. And I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the tragic events at Leicester has obviously brought out all of the love and admiration for Vichai, their former owner, and lots of people have been making the kind of comparison of various other clubs and their owners unfavourably to him, because he was so loved for not only the success that he produced on the pitch with that amazing title-winning season, but the things he did off the pitch actually made a real difference. He gave £1 million for the local hospital and the university. Yes, he did the stuff like the clappers and the free beer, but he actually made kind of worthwhile gestures, and he was very visible, and people knew him and knew what he was about, and he had a great kind of connection with the friends and with the fans. And Gao just seems to be completely invisible. I don't think he's made any statement. As you said, Krueger is his mouthpiece. Krueger actually said that in that same interview, January is not an active time for us usually, and that's not what fans want to hear. They want to hear, yes, things have been really bad on the pitch, and so we will strengthen in January, and not sort of talk about long-term infrastructure, investment, because you're not going to be able to make St Mary's 50,000 capacity and sell it out if you're relegated to the Championship. So,
right. And
they've even had trouble selling tickets at the moment. So there's a real disconnect, I think, with the fans and the board at the moment. There was even talk of protests. I don't know if this materialised. It wouldn't have been appropriate, probably, with it being the day before Remembrance Sunday, but certainly maybe at the next home game there may well be protests. And as you said, with Martin Hunter, he came in exactly the same time as Reid, and you had that kind of a golden generation, I suppose, of players like, especially Adam Leitch was a real star performer in League One at the time, in the Championship, and he's sort of completely hated by a lot of fans now for the way he left, and that's fair enough. It was pretty toxic, but he obviously did a lot of great stuff for us in the past. We had obviously Oxlade-Chamberlain, Callum Chambers. So yeah, a lot of great youth players that played for us and then went on to other clubs. And now, as you said, who we've got, Harrison Reed is at Blackburn, Jake Hesketh's at Burton Albion, Sam McQueen at Middlesbrough, Josh Sims is at Reading. I think Sims in particular is a real puzzler for the fans, because he just had such a good season when he played. That goal, the assist he got for Shane Long's goal in the semi-final Liverpool is
right.
One of the most memorable moments of the past few seasons, and he just seemed to really have a really kind of attacking mindset. He played really well against Everton, I remember, and people want to see players that just have no fear and run at the opposition's goal and attack. So you're right; it's a really kind of puzzling time as to why, of all of those players, they're just deemed not good enough. And I know the big clubs do this a lot. Chelsea have so many players on loan around the country, and Europe and City do. But we don't have the squads and the quality of those teams. So you'd think we would want to bring in bring our youth players in, especially when the signings really haven't made the impact that we would have hoped for.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I think there are a number of things that we're going to have to address. I think it's going to be difficult for the club to move into January and start making a bunch of signings, because one, like Krueger said, it's not normally what we do. And at the same time, if we're going to replace Reid and Martin Hunter, which I keep wanting to call Alex Hunter, which is why I only said his last name earlier, because I played the stupid whatever FIFA thing, and now I have that guy in my head. But if we're going to replace them, then it's going to be, they kind of need to be in that position to make those signings. I don't necessarily want Ralph Krueger identifying talent, and it's not that he's the only person on the team that's he wouldn't necessarily be doing that, I guess. But I want somebody that's overseeing that to have a clear direction of where the club is going before we start spending 25, 30 million pounds on somebody because we need to make a signing because the fans are unhappy and because we're not scoring goals. I don't think that's in the sustainability model that Saints have set up with. And I think as a fan of Saints, having come in later than a lot of people, that's kind of what I signed up for, was the sustainability model. So I have a harder time being upset when they follow that. As somebody who's been watching the club for longer, you maybe have a different perspective, and I have to respect that as well. I just try not to throw a bunch of stones at the club, because I kind of knew what I was getting into when I got into it,
Yeah, I think I think my kind of issue is more with the way he phrased it, just saying, oh, well, January's not our time for signings. If he'd given a bit more context and explained, as you said, about trying to produce a more kind of sustainable model, or he talked about youth players, then that would have been a bit more understandable. But instead, he just sort of seemed to sort of shut down the issue with management speak. That's the frustrating thing. I think it's that lack of clear communication. I suppose now they have got the fans forum, which is sort of an attempt at transparency, so that people can actually go along and say in person how they feel. And that must be quite a tense atmosphere at the moment, I imagine.
Yeah, well, and it's not always just what you say; it's kind of how you say it, and it's what you don't say. And I've gathered just from I think things that people have said and written that Krueger maybe doesn't necessarily read the room very well when he speaks. Yeah. And I think that's one of those instances where you have to know your audience. And I'm probably guilty of it as well. I've probably said things on here that are absolutely ridiculous, and it's just the way it goes. But, I mean, we're talking right now. I can't see your face. So like when you have the ability to sit in front of a reporter even and kind of watch the way they react to something, then you can, ask a question, see what the feedback is, and you can move on that and use that. But he doesn't seem to do that very well, which makes it hard when your job is talking. You would expect him to be a little better at it. But all right, we have a couple of questions. I don't want to take too much more time because we're kind of near the kind of, there's a magic kind of 5-minute window where when we stop it here, it works out really well for me. Which is totally selfish, but my daughter has more stuff we have to do, so I have to go do that. But
quickly, I was just going to say that I've read that Mark Devlin, who was at Brentford before, is potentially in the frame for Les's role. He was at Brentford for 7 years. He sort of helped with the relocation to their new stadium, which is going to be by Kew Bridge in London. People think they're doing pretty well at the moment. I know they're mid-table-ish in the Championship, but for a club of their size, they seem to be performing well. So, yeah, watch this space as concerns him. Maybe it's not that exciting for people to say, oh, he's coming from Brentford, but yeah, that's a name that's potentially out there.
Yeah, I don't know if there is a name where I would be like super excited as somebody's coming in as the technical director. It's like, what's going to happen for me when they announce somebody is I'm going to Google them, read their Wikipedia page, and see where they've worked and what they've done, and that's basically what I'm going to do. Well,
one consequence though is that Hughes hinted, hasn't he, that he will now get more say over, assuming he stays in post, obviously, he'll get more say over transfers. He kind of seemed to be suggesting that he was rather blocked from getting the kind of players he wanted in.
Which I think is good that he was blocked, because I don't need 4 center backs and then 4 more center backs and then 2 just wild attackers. I don't really want that.
Yeah. Well, after the Newcastle game, I was pretty annoyed. So I made a joke on Twitter saying, oh, it turns out that Southampton have turned up as dressed as Stoke for Halloween.
I saw that. I thought it was good. Yeah,
so that might become, more of a reality rather than just a horrible fantasy if he does get more control.
Yeah, and was it Shawcross that broke? Who was it?
Aaron Ramsey. He broke his leg, and then now for some ridiculous reason, the Stoke fans boo Aaron Ramsey when they play. Obviously, they're not playing each other this season.
Right.
But that's one of the kind of more moronic kind of incidents in football, I have to say.
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason that I dislike Stoke is because of my Arsenal friend and watching that and having that kind of carryover. I just don't like Shawcross. I don't want him anywhere. I don't want him anywhere near like a team that I like, stay in the Championship.
I mean, we would have taken Shaqiri though. He was brilliant for Liverpool today, but alas, he wouldn't have come to us, but that's one of the few Stoke players we've definitely taken.
Right. Yeah, it might have been interesting for, is it him and Tadic to be on the same team at some point? Like that one, I don't know how that would go. Given the political rivalries and such. Anyway, we have questions here about players to sign. I'm not sure. Reed gone. Where do we go from here? I think we talked about that. I guess here's one that we can kind of like sum up a little bit and maybe just bring some closure to the discussion we had earlier. DP_0507 says, do you agree with what Austin said? So in that post-match interview, as I'm going to assume he's what he's talking about, but do you agree with kind of the VAR discussion, I guess, that we were cost 2 points, but we both said that was a clear penalty. So, maybe we're down to 10 men, but I don't know. Did what Austin say make sense in terms of maybe a VAR?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, take it away from yesterday's game. You have it in La Liga, you have it in the Bundesliga. You had it trialed in, I think, the FA Cup last season, and obviously you had it in the World Cup. I think it's a no-brainer. You obviously have goal line technology now. And as you said, it almost took longer for the referee decision anyway than some of the VAR ones. So regardless of the rights and wrongs of the one yesterday, I think it's an absolute must. And actually today in the Liverpool game, you saw Fulham score what looked like an onside goal, and it was ruled out. And then Liverpool went straight up the other end and scored.
Right.
But there's obviously quite a kind of ingrained feeling amongst the smaller clubs that the big teams always get the big decisions. And one of the most notorious examples was, of course, the League Cup final 2 years ago when Gabbiadini scored a perfectly legitimate goal against Manchester United. And of course, it was ruled incorrectly offside because referees love Manchester United. And we lost. And had we had VAR, that goal would have scored. We would have gone 1-0 up. I think that's less contentious than yesterday because then, there wasn't an equivalent incident to kind of balance it out. That was a clear kind of advantage for us. So I'm 100% in favour of VAR. So I agree with Charlie in that respect that referees need all the help they can get. But I think the problem was that he was basically saying the only reason we didn't get 3 points because of that, and he was using it slightly as a cover to mask, a lot of our deficiencies, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's going to both take away and give you some points back, maybe. But in the times when VAR is used and it penalizes you, you can at least say, well, that was deserved, and you understand it a bit more. Versus now, because it wasn't used, we feel much aggrieved because it would have benefited us to have it a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. We have a couple of other questions, but I think we have time for one more. And this is from _Ben. McGreevy. He sent in a couple of things last week, and he says, would you take a relegation if it meant we came back up in 3 or 4 years with a club back to pre-Puel quality? Which I think is kind of a bigger question, but looking, when I read the question, I think about the fact that we're kind of without the essentially director of football guy. We need to replace that. The youth academy isn't producing as many players. If you had the guarantee of coming back up in 3 or 4 years, would you consider going down and kind of reassessing and rebuilding and coming back up? Or would you not want that to happen? Would you rather grind out a couple of years, maybe towards the bottom of the Premier League and then be mid-table for I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years after that? Yeah,
so it's difficult really because there's always the argument that if we went down, we would rebuild, we would actually win some games, so it'll be actually fun to go and watch. And we would have that winning feeling. We would be able to come away from the ground feeling positive about our weekend. And we'd have players that were committed and not just there for the money because they would leave. And I think people like Bertrand and Cedric would go and sit on the bench at a big top 6 club for the money. But on the other hand, I think people slightly, overemphasize the fact that we would be a big fish in a small pond. Actually, you've got huge teams in the Championship. Mm-hmm. People really struggle often when they go down, you lose the parachute payments. Obviously, I think it's after your second season, so going into your third one, you've lost them. Right. And also, maybe from a more selfish perspective, when you're in the Premier League, you can watch the best players in the world and you can watch incredible passing and skill and so on. Championship obviously is good quality, but it's not the same. And you would watch a lot of kind of agricultural, physical football. There's more games to go to. Might be a bit cheaper. There's so many positives and negatives on both sides, but I think there's a real danger of things spiraling out of control and going down all the way back to League One. So it may be the case that rather than it just being 2 or 3 seasons to rebuild, it can end up being a 5 or 6 year thing, and then you have only about 10,000 people in the stadium, and you lose what atmosphere you had left anyway. So right. If you said, okay, here's your pact with the devil, you get to choose, I would say yes, I would go down, but only for 1 season if I was guaranteed to come back up again, because 1 season of exciting, attractive football, winning and coming back is fine, but not at the cost of 2 or more, basically. Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a whole cycle of players that you're going to miss out on, or that are going to be of a different quality, and it's tough to convince players to stay at Saints now. Never mind if we were to go down, and what a lot of those players would do to move away then. I mean, people obviously really hate the fact that Mane and Van Dijk left. But you also have to remember that we got to see those players in Saints shirts playing brilliantly. And yes, there's obviously a question of did they, towards the end when they wanted to move, did they just down tools and phone it in because they weren't motivated? But for a time, they have to prove themselves. And unfortunately, the way football is with the big six just becoming so much, breaking away so far from the rest. I think I saw a stat saying out of the games that the top six have played against the rest of the teams, they've only lost one or something crazy like that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of talk about them forming a European Super League with kind of the top echelons of European football. I think that would be a real disaster. I really hope that doesn't happen. But the Premier League is incredibly exciting, and yeah, I mean, I would rather stay. I think I'd rather stay in it. If I absolutely had to choose, I'd like to stay in it.
All right. Well, that's it. The rest of the questions I will try to answer on Instagram, just because we don't have quite enough time, but I do appreciate people sending those in. So you can always do that on Twitter or Instagram. Just look for the post, send a DM. It does not matter. However you want to do it. Tim, thank you so much for joining me. It's been nice to talk to you both before and during the podcast. And I am hoping to be able to get over there at some point and watch the team, have more food, see more sights, do all of that stuff. Although I'm fairly confident in saying that it will be a much shorter trip if I do it again, and it will probably be just me trying to power through a bunch of jet lag. But you got enough coffee shops around. I think I can do it. Yeah,
you certainly do. And I don't think it can be any worse than the game you saw before in terms of the result. Hopefully, it wouldn't be another 3-0 loss. So
yeah, no. But if I can avoid going back to West Ham again, I would definitely. I would like to try a different stadium. I raised my hand for something else. I mean, I've just looked at the table, just as I think all the games for this weekend are done as we're talking now. We go into the international break in 17th place on goal difference by 1 goal. So we are out of the relegation zone by 1 goal on goal difference ahead of Cardiff, which is just not good enough.
Yeah, and actually that's something I did agree with Charlie as well, and I think the fans liked to hear, which is he was saying if we had won, we would be going into the international break off the back of the victory, something to build on when we get back, and instead we're frustrated. So just you don't quite get that sense of momentum that you would have done with a win.
Right. Yeah, it changes the whole momentum of the thing, and it just puts that much more emphasis on Fulham in 2 weeks, I guess. So we will see. But thanks again, Tim, for doing this. I appreciate it, and we'll be sure to talk to you soon.
No problem. It's been great. Thanks.
And that does it for episode 96 of the Southampton Delivery Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you've enjoyed it. Special thanks this week goes out to Tim Marshall. Once again, thank you for stepping in on such short notice. Thanks for chatting with me. Thanks for taking care of me while my family and I were in London. I really do appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon. If you'd like to follow Tim on Twitter, get his opinion on Saints more often, you can do that at Tim J. Marshall. It's the same on Instagram, although there is significantly less Saints content. If you like running, though, it's probably a good thing to go follow. Anyway, other thanks goes out this week to everybody who sent in questions. We did not get to them all, and I apologize, but I will answer them as the week goes on the Instagram story, because I do appreciate you interacting. We just didn't have time this week because the episode is already too long, in my opinion. If you want to follow this show on Twitter or Instagram so you can send in questions, you can even do it on Facebook. We're at SFCDELL_IVERY, both on Twitter and Instagram. And we're at facebook.com/SFC Delivery. There is no underscore in the Facebook address. If you're not following along, you should do so. Don't miss out on anything that we put out throughout the week. We'll even be up there doing stuff during the international break, and we will have an episode next week as well. If you haven't subscribed to the show yet, you should. You can do that on iTunes, Stitcher, Acast, Google Play, TuneIn Radio, or wherever else you listen to podcasts. Type in the name, look for Delivery with 2 L's, and it should bring you up. If you have trouble, let me know. This podcast is partnered with the Southampton page. You can find them on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Do not miss out on the wonderful content they have for you. A wonderful team of guys that I really do enjoy working with, bringing you stuff each and every week. The logo for the show was done by Matt Beeling of the We Are Southampton page on Instagram. Matt has been a friend of the show. He was on very early on, and he's been a huge supporter from day one. So go over there and check out all of his stuff that he has going on the page. All music for the show comes courtesy of the Free Music Archive at freemusicarchive.org. The intro song is Epic Song by Boxcat Games, and the end of show credits that you're listening to right now is Aim is True by Poddington Bear. That does it for this week, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen. Please, if you like, share the show, leave a review. All of that stuff helps. And until next time, remember that together, we march on. Hey, Dad, thanks for calling, man. Haven't heard from you in a while, but did you hear the news? I know you haven't been on Facebook for a while and that you don't use Twitter and that your Instagram you're locked out of. But did you see that Saints fired Les Reed finally after all this time? All the things, he's finally gone?
It's ridiculous.
What? How is that ridiculous? Like, the man was terrible over the past few seasons. There's been almost nothing positive to speak of on or off the pitch for most of the last 2 or 3 years. The manager appointments.
Many positives.
No, there have been no positives. You are completely wrong. Why are we even having this conversation? Are you serious that you really, really think they hired a guy? They hired 2 guys in a row that would just say yes to everything they wanted. They let the best 2 managers that we had go because they wouldn't meet his demands in terms of the transfer market. And the second one, who knows if he would have stayed, but I mean, those were the best 2 managers we had in recent seasons, followed up by 2 guys who just say yes. And then one of your buddies who has a 22% winning percentage, 22%. You're talking 5 wins out of 22 matches over 2 seasons. And they just said that they are totally happy with that. I mean, would you be happy with that if that was your team? Like, there's no way that you would stand for that.
It's ridiculous. It's a joke. Clearly they need help.
Yeah, see, now we're on the same page. Clearly they do need help. And I think you need some help if you're going to continue down this road of not really acknowledging that they really do need it. And I don't really know how to convince you other than saying 5 wins out of 22 and 1 win in a calendar year at home. I mean, how does that taste? That doesn't taste good.
It's a joke.
Yeah, it is a joke. You're right. But I don't know how we fix it. Like,
it's a joke. Clearly they need help. Clearly, give them all the help they need.
I guess you're right. Whatever they ask, whatever they need, I guess we'll do it because that's what fans do. We want the team to benefit, right? Like that's right. Yeah. Anyway, nice to talk to you. Good chat.
Many positives.
Yep. Many positives. Love you. Talk to you later.